yes, today is about, yes, it's about our parents, and it's really about how to bring the love back to that relationship with either one or both of our parents. But it's also about all relationships, where any relationship that you feel is maybe lacking love or that is blocked or stuck in some way, then this will just, I hope, give you some support or at least some clarity of where it's really at, to really acknowledge the truth about it, and then to move forward and take the next steps towards healing and towards bringing that love back. And as we go on, I'm going to show you one thing, which is my favorite thing. It's a roadmap for really bringing the love back to any relationship, even with parts of ourselves, called the healing triangle. And we're going to go through that. And that part will really get us some clarity of what's happening, where we're at, and then where to go next. All right. And then where to go next. All right. And then where to go next. All right. And then... Okay, there's some more audio coming through my speakers. All right, so I would love to start just sharing a bit about my own personal journey. I've been working with people for over 10 years now in different things, but really in the last 5 years, I've been doing a lot of energy work and working with trauma, working with people's repressed emotions to really help them love themselves again and bring that love back and full self-acceptance and the worthiness that we often lack. So what I will start with is with my mum, my relationship with my mum. It really started when I was young. I was like a real mama's boy, right? I was the youngest of three. And what happened was my dad was a little distant, I guess. And that we'll get into a bit later, but with my mum, it was really like, I became super attached and very insecure without her. I really was super dependent, codependent, where I needed her for everything. And I became a people pleaser from that, from a lot of those experiences, because my whole life became about pleasing my mum. She was like God for me, you know? And I think that, with that, it was like I saw her as an angel, right? I just saw positives with my mum and no negatives. And that really put the balance off in the relationship. And I was very small and she was very big. And that's to do with both of us. I guess that's participating in both my own energy, I take responsibility for the way I felt, even when I was young, even I'm talking 3, 4, 5 years old. But for her, I'm not blaming her, but I did at one point and resented her for those things. So with mum, it was more like I had to let go of all the needs, and we're going to get into this very soon, all the needs that I had from her, the need for love, the need for acceptance, the need to be heard and cared for, all these kinds of things that I was stuck in, and the need for her approval as well. One of the most challenging things was to really create enough space from my mum in order to be myself. So there wasn't freedom in this space. And we're going to talk a little bit more about enmeshment and being entangled with other people as well. But one thing I had to be really okay with was actually that my decisions might hurt my mum. And it took a lot of work to get there. I probably only got there when I was like 29 or 30, so about 4 or 5 years ago. But it took pulling all these things that I was getting from my mum, the care, the love, the acceptance, the nurturing, continually pulling them in over my 20s and late 20s, really making it that I'm getting my own needs met and that my mum is not meeting my needs anymore. And that's how I was able to step from being a boy, felt like I was a boy until 28, 29 years old, even 30, because I hadn't let go of my mum. I hadn't cut that attachment in a way. I hadn't separated into my own person. So I kept participating in the old dynamics. And until I did that emotional work and really released it all, was I able to actually be my full self. And this is the key. It's until we do that emotional work, especially with our parents, because we've got so many emotional experiences with them, what happens is if we don't release some of those, which we'll also touch on later, then we're going to be continually getting triggered and participating in the old dynamics. So we want to do the emotional work to clean it up. And this is going to be able to show us how. But right now, I mean, in terms of with my mum, she really accepts me as I am, doesn't try to be a mummy kind of thing anymore. And she really just lets me do my thing. And we have a beautiful, mutual, respecting relationship. And this is one of the things that we're going to get into next is the four things that are really important for respect, especially in the relationship with your parents. So what I would do is when we go through this, think about both parents, think about one parent, wherever you feel the stuckness and the lack of love in a way. But also it could just be a different relationship. These dynamics play out in so many relationships with partners, with friends, with siblings. So this can be applied to any relationship. We're going to use the whiteboard to really demonstrate some of these things. It's very helpful to get the visual. The first thing we'll start with is being equal in the space though, being equal in the container. If anything to start with is every relationship is a container, okay? Whether it's two people, whether it's a group of people, but they all exist in this container. So we'll use this as a container. And in that container, let's just say with me and my mum, for example, I put her above me for so long. So this was me. And this was my mum. And I put her above me. And that means she's always looking down at me like a child, basically. So she's looking down at me, I'm looking up at her. And until we change this situation, it's not really going to change. So what happens and keeps us stuck in these dynamics is often certain beliefs. And the beliefs, things like, for example, with my mum, I believed that I needed her. I believed that I owed her. I believed that, like I said, that she was perfect and all positive. I couldn't see any negatives, right? I also believed that I was not okay with her not loving me or not loving her. So I also put those labels on and those obligations in a way. It's like, no, I need you to love me and I need to love you. So it's like, I'll always love you regardless of what the situation was. But from young, I had this idea in mind where I want to do everything for my mum. You know, I want to keep her happy. But the beliefs are charged with emotions. Until I actually dealt with those emotions, then the beliefs don't go anywhere. And this is what happens. It's kind of like what we call enmeshment or entanglement, where a belief kind of connects us in a way to the person and we're really like enmeshed in their energy. And that's when relationships are super messy. And the reason the parents one is important because we had so many emotional experiences from young that we haven't been able to process. And when we're young in childhood, we can't actually process a lot of them and we dump them into the unconscious. And what happens is they're meant to be processed at some point later on, but most of the time we don't get around to it. We don't really have the tools to deal with it. In our Western kind of culture and society, we don't have anything built in, any practices built in to actually release energy. If you think about, for example, like tribal African dancing where they stomp a lot, that's also a release, right? A release of energy. Think about the haka from New Zealand. They get pretty wild in that and their emotions are going and they really get into it, but there's also a release in that. They're moving energy in ways that we often don't just in our everyday lives. And different emotions too, you know, how do you move through anger through your body? We might move through positive emotions sometimes, like joy and happiness, and we can dance and sing and things like that. But how are we moving through emotions like sadness and grief and rage those kinds of things we've got to tap into, because often they've just been repressed and they're still stuck there in the past, but it's affecting the relationships now. So let's say another example. Let's just go with this, where that might be you, and let's say you put your parent or the person in the relationship below you. You think that they're worse, that they're a bad parent, that they never did a good job, or that they didn't give you the love that you need. And you're in that participation of those dynamics. You're again seeing them as less, seeing them as lower than you. Maybe they're not, you don't believe they're smart. You believe you're smarter than them. Things like that can come up. But again, if you believe that they owe you something, and that can hold you stuck like this. It's like a belief, right? That you need to get something from them, or that they haven't given you what you needed. Maybe it was love, maybe it was safety, maybe it was support as a child, where if you've still got that within, then I can almost guarantee that for a lot of us, if we haven't done the emotional work, that younger part of us is still calling out for that love in some way. But as long as you don't do the work, it says stuff like that. This can also even actually be a straight out belief saying that I'm above my mum, I'm above my dad, or I'm below them for whatever reason. In many cultures, the parents get put up high. It's like they become king and queen, you know, and you really look up to them from young. But this can switch. It can go from maybe being like one way as a child, and then you can switch to being the other way, especially if you've got resentment. And if you blame them for something, this is a really important one. If you're still blaming for your parents for anything, or you resent them for something, then often you're going to have this, it's another connection. It's another way of being enmeshed, and you're putting them below you. It's like, you did this. And that's when you're kind of talking down to someone, and your energy is all going here to them rather than staying within you and you keeping your power and staying centered. So we need that to be balanced, right? The power balance has to come back. We need to see them as equal, and that's how they're going to start seeing us as equal. The participation is really about what we choose to participate with. It's number 2 in the list, where whatever we actually participate with in terms of who we are and who we're participating as in the space is going to then trigger something in them. So let's just say, this is me. This is my mum. If I bring up my old child energy, right? And let's say I'm activated. Let's say I'm really not feeling good about myself. I'm not loving myself. And I get really activated or triggered by something, and I start feeling unloved for some reason. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to then project that there, and my energy is going to then be in this container, right? It's like going to get completely active. And then what happens is, unless the other person is super aware of what's happening and they choose not to participate in those dynamics, then it's just going to go back to, and a lot of the time with our parents, I'm not going to say with everyone, but with our parents, it's often that they're not as maybe emotionally aware as some of us. If you're watching this, you might resonate with that. I'm not going to say it's all the time though. But all that means is if I'm that triggered and that active, then my mum is going to go straight up here, and then she's going to get activated as well in her old dynamics, and she becomes the mum again. Does that make sense? So when that happens, I've got a choice to make where you can even think of it as a boundary, where you're actually just going to say, no, I'm not participating with that. But it takes awareness, right? We've got to notice when we're going into those old patterns. It's kind of like with some people, I remember with my sisters as well. I've got 2 older sisters, and even after we'd all moved out of home, when we'd go back to the family house where we grew up in, because my parents all had that home for the last 30 years, they would have the same conversations over and over again. Every family event that we went up for, whether it was dinner or whatever, it's like the same things would come up. And then my sisters would also have the same reactions. I'd do the same things in the house until I became more aware in my late 20s. That's when I started changing those dynamics and really started noticing that, oh my God, everyone's going back to the same thing that they did from like 20 years ago. And everyone's just doing this. They're not even their current selves right now. They're in the old patterns. And my sisters would get triggered by the same things that maybe my dad would say or my mum would say. And it was just a repeat of the cycle over and over again. So that's good participation. In terms of the next one, which is really the removal of needs, this is super key with parents because as children, when we're born, we have needs that need to be met and we are dependent. We can't live without anyone else, but it's often like, think about just love and safety. We'll just use those two as the needs, okay? If you still hold on to, if someone's got something that you need, then often they're going to be above you. Not always, but let's just say in this case, they're above you. And you're continually going to be chasing those needs from them. If you have a belief that I need love from my dad, or I need love from my mum, or I need anything, I need my mum to be safe. The truth is that actually those needs are a requirement to feel those things, love and safety, even when we're born, but we don't need them from specific people. So if your mum or parent died as soon as you were born, the day you were born, then would you still be okay? Is it possible that you could actually get a love and receive love from maybe someone else, or someone else could take care of you and nurture you? Yes, it's definitely possible and highly likely actually. So that love, that safety, those needs that need to be met, we've just put them onto we use those labels and put that onto them. So it's like, you're my mum, you need to love me. It's your responsibility to love me. Or you're my dad, you need to love me. It's your responsibility to love me. One thing that we're going to go into when we talk about the healing triangle is really is empathy, essentially. If we believe that our needs weren't met by our parents and we're still holding on to that and we believe we can get it from them, there's still going to be some form of attachment there and this entanglement and enmeshment. But if we realize that actually those things are now, obviously as children we might not be able to know that, that's perfect. But right now we can see that can come from within. The love, the safety, the care, the support. A lot of those things actually begin within, and we maybe were never taught that as children. But that is the work to actually bring enough love into you so that you don't need it from anyone else. Because what happens is you're just going to start chasing it and also expecting it and hoping for it from other people. A lot of the time when this gets stuck, when we've got these needs that I need to be loved by my dad, or I need them in my life, we will really, I guess, engage in many dynamics that we don't actually even desire, but because we're not able to really have boundaries and you like disconnected in a way. Does that make sense? There's no space there. And until we remove those needs by really seeing that it's our job now to do that work, then we're going to keep staying attached in that way. So what happens is, even if you haven't changed the power dynamics, as long as you don't have the needs there, because what happens is we start hoping, right? Even if you have that need belief and it's unconscious and you don't even see it, or you might think that you don't have it. But if you have any hope that they're going to change, or that they're going to love you in some way, or that they're going to give you something one day, then it's highly likely that what's backing that is a belief around need, that you need them. That empathy stage that we want to talk about is when we get to that understanding, it's really like we can start to see them as they are, and without that need, we can stop trying to change them or make them any different. And we can realize that when they were younger, when we were kids, that they also had their own trauma. They also had their own emotional baggage. They also had their own blocks. They also had their own restrictions and limitations, their own healing to do. They had their own culture that they might have been stuck in and trapped in. And I think that instead of seeking that love from them, it's like when we're young, what I did with my dad as well is I wanted a certain kind of love from him. It's like I really wanted him to love me in a specific way that I didn't feel was met by him. And I resented him for that, right? I thought he could have been a better dad or whatever. But none of that's actually true. Like when we can actually see and release those needs, and you've got this space here, then you can start to see them for that, oh, wow, they actually did the most they could with what they had from wherever they were at. They did the best they could. And really that for me was the point. As soon as I got to that point, it's like, it was a load off. That's when compassion can come in. That's when the love can come in. That's when forgiveness happens as well. When we realize that they were just being themselves, and whatever they did or the way they loved us, even if it didn't look like love at all, it's the most they had. And if we want more from them even now, or hoping for it, then we're going to be stuck with that pain and with that lack in our lives. So one of the things, the next thing in terms of them seeing you respectfully and respecting you, is the idea of resentment and blame. Because right now, if you've got blame and that resentment happening, where you resent them for something in the past, then you're probably not respecting them. Often in that blame situation, you're putting yourself on top and you're putting them as less. So the dynamics are off already. And it just keeps getting messed around. You're literally switching identities and dynamics all the time. It's like sometimes you're the child and you want something, or sometimes you feel like they aren't giving you enough and then you put them down. So it's like continually going in and out of different dynamics, and it causes a mess because no one's seeing each other clearly. You're not even seeing yourself clearly in the space when that's happening. So if we don't, the one thing with blame, because I know it's super common, resentment is a blocking energy. So it's going to block love anyway, right? It's going to block things from, even if it's money. If you resent money or resent the job that gives you money, then you're going to be blocking money basically and blocking new jobs from coming in. So we need to make peace with that, that's for sure. But until we take responsibility, that's really the key element in this little piece where there's blame and resentment. We have to take responsibility for our participation in whatever happened. Now, take this carefully, I guess, or in a sensitive way, because I'm not saying that they're not responsible for anything. It's like, let's say someone got abused when they were 3 years old. We're not taking responsibility for their actions, their behavior. But there's a level of responsibility, I kind of like to call it now acceptance or acknowledgement of your participation in that. Because remember, in that container, there's always two people. So if there's two, then there's a level of acknowledgement that has to happen. Right now, if there's blame and resentment, you often dump all the energy onto the other person, and we're not actually there at all. So to start letting go and to actually forgive, the key is really bringing it back to focus on you, on your experience. And one of the ways to do that is to really love yourself as the child, and to bring the love back there rather than fighting in the past with whoever it was, one of your parents. Can you possibly release them and from that perspective, I guess, that perspective of your past where you're holding them in this place because you haven't released or moved through some of those emotions that are still there, because that's what it comes down to. If there's anger, rage, even things like fear and anxiety can sit in there as well. Even maybe betrayal, we can feel betrayed by our parents. Things like that. If we don't let that move through, then we're not able to really take that responsibility. It works both ways. If you start to say, I want to acknowledge this, and I'm going to acknowledge more of my participation in that. Remember, we're not putting the responsibility, taking the responsibility away from them, or not even taking anything away from you and your experience. You may have been a victim, for example. But if you keep that perspective, and if you keep that blame and resentment, then you stay the victim even now. And that's when you start letting people who maybe weren't even themselves teach you and control you and teach you who you are when they don't even know who they were. It's really like allowing those experiences to determine who you are today, because you've still got that charge there from those past events. So we have to go back and do the work. And that is how that responsibility or that acknowledgement of our participation there can actually free us from that victim story and start to feel empowered now. And then you get to empower that child. We're going to talk about that more when we get to timeline healing. In terms of the blocking of love, one thing we're going to cover is the main thing that blocks love in any relationship is space. I've experienced this with friends. I've experienced this with ex-girlfriends. I've experienced this with my siblings. Think of someone that is close to you for this one. Use a parent if you like. Wherever the love is really blocked. And then what we're going to see is, especially people that you don't feel like you don't fully accept as they are. So maybe it's someone that you're not able to forgive them. Let's say that. What happens is if you've got the right space, then you will be able to move into that place of love, or at least take the steps towards it, towards acceptance. If the space isn't there, it's not going to happen. So if you look at someone that's getting, that really is fighting with their dad, for example, there's just a lot of friction. Maybe there's abuse of language or physical abuse, and you're seeing them every single day, right? Not only is there enmeshment, but you guys are supercharged, but you're so close that you can't actually start to see them as they are, because that's going to have to happen. And you can't see yourself as you are because you're stuck with them, connected. So that's when they say, like, loving from afar can be easier for some people, right? It doesn't have to be distance-wise, but in that situation, do you think it would be easier if that abusive dad or that person where you've got a lot of charge, would it be easier to love them or actually do work to begin to accept them from a distance? Because maybe you feel safer there. Maybe you can actually breathe. Maybe not in your face every day. Activating that old energy, that's the key. And the answer is yes, it does get easier with that space. Hi for my partner had a really, like, what she did was she lived in Germany, and then when she moved overseas to the US and also then again to Australia, she was able to separate herself with that physical distance and really change and become more of herself. And that's why physical distance can help there, but it's not just that. Even if you've got someone that lives overseas, let's say, but they're still calling you every day, or you're let's say that dad lives overseas and he's still messaging you every day. He wants to talk all the time, every single week. That's still going back to this. So it's not about physical space and distance. That's still that. And that's when we have to be able to use boundaries and actually make calls as adults to really create that separation, that space. What's the most aligned space for you right now? Even with an ex-partner, I'd say you might not be able to be fully yourself with them in full contact with you every day, talking like you used to, or even if you become friends straight away, it's perfect. But it's about that space. If you can't be yourself or feel free in the space, then often the space is off. And you've got to choose what's right for you. Maybe more distance is better for you right now, but you've got to feel into that and know what is right. Even if it's a sibling or someone close to you, we want to check that because in that way we can actually feel more free and just more present as well when we've got the right amount of space between us and how much we're interacting and the ways we're interacting as well. Space is that too. So if you've got someone who you were really close to, let's say a best friend, you guys talk all the time, share everything, the intimate details of your lives, your love lives, everything. You share everything. But then it starts feeling this tension, maybe things aren't working out in a way. If you keep it like that and you just keep going the old way, then it might not be the right space and you have friction and conflict over and over again and those patterns start happening. It literally might just be because there needs to be more space where maybe we're not talking about everything. Maybe we're only talking once a week. Maybe we're only talking once a month now, and maybe that is a better fit. I hope that's making sense, but it's really important. But it's something to feel into in all your spaces, because even a lot of parents, it's like my mum always used to say, message me when you're this, message me when you get home, call me when you arrive on your trip to wherever. It's like, it's not enough space. It doesn't feel good for me. So I need to communicate that and communicate my need for that space, and to really say, I understand that you're concerned, and I appreciate that, but I'm also an adult and I'm going to go doing this, this, and this is how it's going to be. There's obviously consequences to that, but that's part of it. It's like the space doesn't necessarily come like at the click of your fingers and you just immediately create it. You can for some people, but a lot of the time it's going to take communication. It's going to take setting up some healthy boundaries in there to actually create that space and knowing what you're willing to participate with and not. So of course there's courage, there's discomfort, vital factors in that, in a lot of situations. All right, we're going to move on to finish off with the seeking love with an approval piece. It's really about going back to the past where you didn't feel loved and meeting your own needs that you felt were unmet back then, now. And we have that ability. Without going into too much detail about it, time's an illusion. Everything's happening now, right? Everything's happening now. So if you haven't cleared something from the past, it's still active today, and those patterns are going to keep repeating themselves. It's going to maybe look different, new faces, new people, new situations, or sometimes old. It's like old patterns from old triggers are still coming up for you that you've been experiencing for 10 or 20 years that you dislike and that give you a physiological reaction. And that's why we'll move into timeline healing and really talk about that. But before I do, I'd love to just tell you a little bit about my relationship with my dad. With my dad, it went a couple of different ways. Like I remember I said that he was fairly distant in a way. That's what I felt, but that's my expectations that I put on him, that he wasn't giving me enough. So at some point I started seeing him as more than me, right? I had a lot of guilt. He invested a lot of money into my education and cricket. I played a lot of sport, and he spent a lot of time with me, taking me here and there to training, to different events and stuff. Anyway, I really started to see him as above me, that I owed him. Oh my God, he's invested so much in me. He's given me so much. Now I owe him, and I feel guilty if I don't. And so for a time I put him above me in that way. And I had a lot of charge there, but it was often guilt. It's like every time we'd engage, I would lose energy because I feel guilty. It's like, oh my God, I haven't given him back what he wanted. Because at the end, even though I went to private school, I dropped out of uni after 3 weeks because I knew it wasn't for me. And then I stopped playing cricket when I was like 21 or 22. So the two things that he invested in me, and my mum as well, I felt like I disappointed him and let him down, So that guilt was something I carried, and it really weighed me down. I saw myself as less in the space, and then I couldn't be myself in the space. And that's the thing. I wasn't with those emotions, guilt, shame, blame, resentment, even depression, even fear, anxiety. We're not able to be ourselves with them, and therefore they're never going to see us clearly. Does that make sense? It's like they're never going to see you for who you are until you do the right emotional work. And only then will you see yourself clearly in the space, and then you'll also see them clearly. It's a process though. But what happened with my dad is, after I released the guilt, that was around probably 28, 29, where I really acknowledged it and I saw that guilt, and I was able to let a lot of it go and be clean from that. But then what happened is I really moved my dad down, and I started putting myself above and looking at the negatives. And that's when I felt more of the resentment and blame that was there as well, for what he didn't do in the past that I believed I needed from him. And it wasn't until probably 5 or 6 years ago, I really went deeper on the work and I started to come to a place of acceptance. But where I really took it to the next level was with timeline healing. A lot of the work that we do on ourselves is around ourselves, our current self, right? It's like we're doing the healing work on ourselves. Whereas with timeline healing, it's about going into the past to activate whatever's in the past, because it's still active now anyway. And we do the work on ourselves at that time. So for example, with my dad, what I did, I'd done maybe 5 or 6 years of work on and off around him. And the relationship was good, but it wasn't like, I didn't see him as amazing or fully loving and embracing, you know. But when I did a session of timeline healing with myself, on my younger self, I did it myself at 14 years old, right? That's where I engaged with my dad a lot around sport. And a lot of those patterns really started around guilt and different things. In a 2-hour session with myself, in 2 hours, I transformed my relationship with my dad. I respected, honored, and loved him so much more than I ever had, that I could ever remember. And it literally just blew my world apart. I didn't know that it was even possible. I'd done so much different work. Lots of stuff was very effective, but this just took it to a whole new level. Because the reason was it got to the source. So if you look at this, and let's say this is 5-year-old you, or you at a young age, where you experienced some emotions that you couldn't process. Let's say it was a traumatic kind of situation. Then what happens is, in those same situations, so in those same relationship containers, in those same spaces, in those same environments, the 5-year-old that hasn't actually processed those things actually gets activated. And Joe Dispenza, who's amazing, he says emotions anchor us to the past. And they really do. Because if you haven't processed those emotions, it's literally that old identity of you, that younger you is coming up. It's calling out and saying, whoa, I don't like this situation. Or, wow, this is the same thing before. Because all patterns that are unfinished and unprocessed are trying to repeat them. They're trying to complete. I really believe that. And if they're trying to complete, they're going to try and pop out at wherever they can to be completed. But often we don't let them complete. We stop it. No, I don't want to be angry. No, I don't want to be sad. No, I don't want to feel that grief. I don't want to feel that. And we avoid it and we push it down. And what happens is the current you, it's literally just transferring all that old energy that's activated into your body right now. And that's what you feel when you feel triggered. What is it? It's often something from the past that is being triggered, but we don't even know what it is. But it's a younger self, an unhealed part of ourselves that is really getting activated. And then it's like, you can't even think clearly when you're triggered, because it's not even, you're not thinking as you. There's a conflicting energy going on. I remember doing work on my sister even just recently, and I felt like I was 12 years old, and I was just like, what the hell? I couldn't even speak properly. I couldn't think properly. It was so weird. But I knew that it's the 12-year-old self in me. I don't have the capacity to think clearly and try to be empathetic and these kinds of things. It was so just like I was a little kid. So I had to really respect that and honor that and go in, and that allowed me to soften with myself. And that's what happens when we go through the work and to the healing triangle, is we get to soften. And I'll explain that in just a second. But after the timeline healing, what happens is with my dad, for example, I did the work around the right self, and I cleared the emotions that I was holding on to from when I was 14 and around that time. So now that I enter in the space with my dad, those emotions are gone and nothing gets transferred over, just memories. Memories, whatever I see is truth. The timeline healing, actually, when you go back here, what you'll find is everyone that does it they unlock old memories, because we've got a specific view of the past that is backed by certain stories that have emotions. When you clear the emotions, it allows those stories to break down and new memories can actually come through, and you will start to see more truth. And then it's like, you're in this after that as yourself, as your current self. The child is almost healed and with you, and you can just be yourself in those spaces. Really quite simple. I won't go into too much more detail than that, because I think that makes the point that if you do the right work, on the right self, the younger part of you that really needs it, you'll see massive results. And you can even do that just in your own dialogue, in a dialogue, really saying, who is this? We're trying to heal the who, not the what, right? Get that. When something's activated within us, if we could soften, instead of fighting against it and saying, I wish that person didn't do this, or I'm so triggered, I'm so pissed. If we can go in and soften and quieten down and say, who is it that's actually there? That who's calling out for me? Who needs to be heard? Who needs to be seen? Is there something that wants to be expressed within me? And what you can find is if you are able to soften and create that in a dialogue, beautiful healing can happen, beautiful communication can happen, and it needs to happen, this internal communication with ourselves. So this is the healing triangle. This is really the roadmap to bringing love back to any relationship and to healing even parts of ourselves, even with if it's a disease or something else or a chronic illness. This can be applied to almost everything. I'm going to run through it pretty quickly. But this conscious awareness, right? This is the triangle here, and everything inside it is conscious awareness. Everything outside under this red line is what's unconscious or we're unwilling to make conscious. So this here is things where we're actually in denial, where we're lying to ourselves, where we're delusional, where we are avoiding things, where there's discomfort that we are unwilling to deal with or engage with in a way. There's also attachment in there as well. And as we go through the steps, starting at acknowledgement, I'll just read them out quickly. There's acknowledgement, resistance, empathy, compassion, acceptance, honor, embrace, celebration, and appreciation. But let's start at acknowledgement, right? It's the first step to really healing, and it's the first step to healing the relationship with your parents as well, and any relationship. We need to acknowledge what is actually stuck. Because if a lot of the time we have issues with our parents or people, we're going to be stuck in this stage here, all down here. So we can't actually accept them or honor them or be compassionate or forgive them because we're stuck down here and there's things we're not willing to bring in, not willing to also take responsibility for, not willing to acknowledge. So this is probably the most important part, and that's why we, in the timeline healing, we actually use an emotional and energetic clearing technique to unlock those emotions, to really start bringing stuff in. Resistance stage is the things we're fighting against. So this, if you look at the past of your childhood with your parents, the things that you're resisting are whatever you're fighting against, whatever you are pushing against it, whatever you wish was different, wherever there's a regret or blame or resentment, where you wish that, I wish they did that differently, or I wish I was different. I used to wish that I was there. I used to wish that I wasn't shy. I used to wish that I was healthier. I wish I used to have a better body. I used to wish that that my mum didn't spoil me. I used to wish I wasn't the mum's boy. I used to wish I didn't cry so much. All these things, but what's that doing? That child, I'm literally saying, I don't like you. I don't love you. I don't accept you for who you are. And it's causing this internal battle, and we're stuck here. We're really stuck here. So any part of you or someone else or any experience that you wish was different, you're going to be stuck in this resistance stage. The key here is empathy, right? It is the thing that bridges the gap. It bridges the gap because we have to soften here. It's not often one of the things, the common blocks, the common challenges people have, right, in healing anything, is they try to jump too far. They go from fighting it and saying, oh, I want to embrace it, or I want to fully accept it, or I want to forgive them. But this little star here, that's forgiveness. It happens between compassion and acceptance, right? But you've got to get here first. You've got to start bringing the love in. And really what we're talking about here is, can we soften and just take that next step into empathy, which is understanding. It's wanting to listen, really being open without judgment and saying, I'm ready to hear something new. I'm ready to see you as something new. Once you can soften there, magic starts to happen. That really is, because the resistance is where everything is heavy and there's tension, right? So we want to, if we can start to get good at just being open to understanding, things start to move. Acknowledgement is what gets things moving. You pull stuff in, but then when you can soften, you can start bringing stuff from now that resistance stage into here, and you will start to soften as well with the people around you and in the spaces that have tension. So when we talk about bringing the love back, at compassion, that's where it begins to really come in. We've heard them, we've seen them, but at compassion, we start uh, being able to love them again as they are. There's still might be some parts of us that want to change them in some way or wish a few things were different, but when the majority of our energy starts going to here, we're really, really starting to see them as they are and to bring them back to closer to balance, right? We're maybe able to uplift them if they were down, or maybe uplift ourselves to bring more compassion to ourselves to make that happen. The next in that, the forgiveness piece is really, as soon as you forgive, what happens is it's like bang. If you forgive them, and often it's also with ourselves as well that we've got to forgive because of how we participated or what we received. That's a key piece that people hold on to. There's often shame maybe about how we dealt with things, or we wish we were different, and we need to forgive ourselves. That is really where it just drops over to acceptance. And that's this whole thing here. Acceptance is the point of neutrality. That's where the emotions are neutralized. And that's where there is this balance, right? And we don't need to change them because that's where the space is too. So we can really see them clearly, see ourselves more clearly. And then it's up to us. Once we get to that acceptance point, it's like everything's dropped. All the baggage is dropped, because that's what happens when we forgive. And then we can choose if we're going to leave that relationship as it is and keep it at that acceptance level, or we're going to do more work, which we're not really going to go into today, to do work to honor them, which is around respect, fully respecting them for who they are. And then you can choose to go into embrace that part of them or you for what they actually did. It's like, for me, I really started to embrace my younger self, that I used shyness to protect myself and keep myself safe. And I started embracing that. And then I started celebrating it. So instead of just supporting and and embracing it, I went to a whole new level of like cheering myself on and saying, yes, you did the right thing. Like, you did what you knew. And I like commend you for that. I really uplifted myself in that way. And that's the only way I was able to take myself to appreciation, where I could actually reveal all the gifts and the treasures of those experiences. It's the same thing with my dad. The only way to pull out things that were negative, maybe around here that we saw negative, when you get to the appreciation stage, that's where you're able to use those experiences in a beneficial way for you now. They might not have been beneficial for you then, or they might have been harmful, or whatever it might be. But when you can bring it around to here, you can really use so much more of the, those experiences to benefit you now. So that's the healing triangle. Where do you think you are? Pick a parent or both, or a relationship that feels stuck. And can you see that you are maybe around here? Or maybe it's around here where you can understand them, but you haven't really decided to forgive them. There's something else there. If you haven't been able to get to this point, then there's more here. There's more work to do at the empathy stage. If you're not getting past this or past this, there's more work to do at the stage before. So if you're not moving through resistance, then you've got to deal with that. Like, before you can get to the empathy, it's like, you got to deal with this. There's probably more stuff to acknowledge in there, whether it's to do with you or the other person. And that's the other common block, is people aren't willing to take that responsibility as well for their participation. And they believe that it's like, and they believe that, no, I don't need to deal with it. That's done. They did it. And it's like, you're holding it there, but that keeps everything stuck. It's like everything is moving. Everything's always moving, right? And if we say that was in the past, I'm not going back there, that's another one. People aren't willing to go back to the past all the time, where there's discomfort. But we don't necessarily have to dive into all the details, but the main thing is we want to see the emotions. And you'll have ideas of what you regret, what you wish was different. Things will still pop into your mind even now as flashbacks. So it's giving you signs. Your unconscious is always giving you signs of what needs to be processed. But even look right now in your relationships, where is it showing up? A lot of people that maybe had issues with their father, they might find issues in their relationships now, whether it's an intimate relationship or a relationship with men in general. You might have formed a belief from your dad that I don't trust men. And that can just flow on until you deal with that dad relationship. It just flows on into your relationships with partners, with other friends, with men in general, because you still don't trust them, because every time you see a man, it's like bringing up something that is relating to your relationship with your dad. And that is why parent work is it's so vital. It's so important. It is really some of the most important emotional, like, deconditioning work we can do. We've got so many beliefs from them and so many experiences where, yeah, we've got to move through it. So in terms of releasing those trapped emotions, I always use this to kind of see where I'm at on the map. And then I go into whatever stage. I ask myself, what am I still angry about? What am I still upset about there? Why am I not forgiving them? Why am I so, like, why is this triggering me? And who is it triggering within me? And then I'm able to kind of see really more in depth what's going on and where the healing is needed and who it's needed for. Such a key piece. In terms of other ways to release energy and release these emotions, it's really about, for me, if it's around sadness, I use meditation. I use softening meditations where there's nice music and I can just have that inner dialogue with myself. And I promise you, it's all it takes. We have to use the body as well, though. So a lot of the time we think it's just mental, right? You can do talk therapy for 10 years and not make any progress. There's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing I'm taking away from it. But what I've seen is the most effective for me and my clients is using our body-mind system. It's one system and they work together. The body really is the unconscious mind. So when we start working with the stuff from the past, we are working with the body. That's why we get so activated. The body gets activated because it's almost like it's going into the past. And it doesn't like that. It really, it wants to be present, right? The body wants to be present. So we can use the inner dialogue. We can use meditation to soften and release through tears. Crying for me is one of my favorite tools to release that kind of energy. If it's anger and resentment, I might do some shaking. I really might shake my body intensely to flush some of that out when it's activated in me, especially when I'm triggered. I might also shout and yell or scream into a pillow. I might twist a towel to really release that energy. A lot of the time, anger that we haven't felt, because who has really felt their anger and rage fully? Not a lot of people. But we want to take it to the extreme, right? Let that pattern fully play out. It doesn't have to harm anyone. It doesn't have to be directed at anyone, but it needs to be moved through the body. So often I might just even scream in the car, or I'll do boxing. It can just be boxing at home, you know? It can even be by myself for 5 or 10 minutes, where I'm really letting it out of my body. And what you'll feel with anger especially, it wants to come out of the hands, the feet, and the mouth. That's why you get a tight jaw and you want to scream when you're angry. It's why you want to hit things and kick things, because that anger wants to come out of that way. And when you can start to know these things and notice them come in, and start to flush them out in really just more effective ways, where it doesn't have to be stuck inside you anymore. Because what we do is, if anger comes up, it's like, nope, don't want to be angry, I'm pushing it down. Nope, don't want to be sad right now, I'm pushing it down. But we have to open up the floodgates for our emotions to flow. So that's really the beauty about the healing triangle and the timeline healing. They kind of work together in that way to let those emotions flow by acknowledging, and then through the breath as well. And what I'll share with you now is just, I hope you guys got some value from that. And what I'll go into now is just something that I'm offering for everyone that attended the webinar. Because this work, it means a lot to me. It's really my life's work. It's been so valuable for me, and it's my way of serving, I guess. It's a huge part of my purpose to help people heal, to support them in becoming free. I just want people to be themselves. And where I see people being themselves the least is in their relationships with their parents. Honestly, I saw it with myself. I see it with my sisters. I see it with just almost everyone. So if that resonates for you, and you feel that you're almost least like yourself with your parents, or that you desire to be more of yourself and be more free with them, or in any relationship this applies to, right? Wherever you're not free and can be yourself, then this might help you. What we've got is usually the timeline healing session with me, right? It's 90 minutes, and usually it's $195. So what it is we basically go into we use an energetic clearing technique, and we go into a specific time. If you're working on your mum, for example, and we go into childhood where maybe you felt unloved, and we can figure that out through using technique, the energetic clearing technique. We can see the actual age that needs to be worked on. And then once we get that right age, and we feel that alignment, we then go through and clear the different levels of, at a spiritual level, we clear it at a mental level, a heart and love level. We clear it at a level of personal power and sense of self. We clear it at a level of communication if we couldn't express ourselves in some way or speak our truth or be ourselves. We clear it at a level of sexuality, emotional level. We clear it at a physical level of the body, of safety and survival, if we were ever threatened or felt unsafe, of taking action. And we clear it at a level of giving as well. So the energy that I gave to that person and the energy that I received from that person. So it's super thorough. And what happens from that is it really takes steps further into that, along that healing triangle. If you're at a place of totally unconscious, then we're going to move stuff into empathy, right? So you take 1 or 2 steps forward. If you're at a place of resistance where it's like, I've got so much anger and so much resentment still, then it's going to take you most likely past empathy. You go through empathy and into compassion and forgiveness, and then even acceptance from that. But it can really allow you to take a big jump forward if you're ready for it. If it's something that you're like, no, I'm so ready to heal this and do this, then it can allow you to take that big jump. Obviously, with that inner dialogue that happens, that you can create for yourself, you can actually do it that way. But if you hit the emotions and get to the core of it and heal it at the source with this timeline healing, then it can really make a huge shift in who you are now. Because timeline healing has a huge ripple effect through time. And you do it at the origin, you heal it at the origin, and it can dissolve. And therefore, it's gone from you now. And you're a completely different person, and you won't be the same when you show up to those spaces. As soon as you change your energy in the space, if you're here and they're up here, if you change your energy, maybe it's you uplifting yourself. You do timeline healing, and then you go bang up here, and now you're equal. And then what happens is you start participating with them at that level, and then they have to change. The space has changed, and it will have an effect on the other person. It literally has to. The key with it is that the other thing that is going to be a part of this, right? So there's the timeline healing, and then there's the, that's normally as a one-off, $195. But what I'm doing is I'm going to throw in some extras as well. Usually a belief clearing session, right? Those beliefs that we talked about, I need my mum, I need my dad, or they need me. I owe them, they owe me. I'm not okay with not receiving love from them. Maybe they're above me or below me. Maybe I believe that that they did something wrong and I'm not willing to forgive them. Maybe I believe they're bad. Maybe I believe they're unsafe. All those kinds of things, different beliefs that are creating that enmeshment and that entanglement. That's what gets cleared in the belief clearing session. So usually that on its own is $150. So I'm going to put that in as well. We've got a little package that we're doing. But what happens in that one is often that when you've got that space, right? When you've got that space, then it's actually okay whatever happens with them. It's not so important what they do and how they respond. They're going to maybe change in some ways and the space will change. Maybe it'll create more space. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll bring you closer together. But it's not about getting them to love you. It's about bringing love back to the space. So what we really deeply care about is our internal experience more than the external. And if we can actually create that love inside us for someone, then I promise you, you're going to be more okay with them not loving you because the love is inside you and it's in the space. And the fact that love exists and it's alive is often enough. And that is when we have healed because we can't control them. We can't make them love us. We can't make them do anything. But the only chance, the best chance we've got at that is to do our own healing work on ourselves and see them as clearly as possible. And therefore that's going to allow them and encourage them to bring out their true self in the space without activating old stuff. So we're doing this work for our relationships. If it's really a choice where it's like, no, I want a new relationship with my dad. So I'm going to do the work for us. It's also, you can do it just for you if you want to do that, but also you can do it for both of you because it is changing things and they're going to become more aligned. They have to be. But like I said, the more aligned for you, for example, with an abusive dad, where the space is like this and you're so close every day, what might happen is you might bring more acceptance to the space and that might then, he can't participate in that and he doesn't know how to participate with you loving him or seeing him as equal. So he might have to leave, or there might be a space created within you where you're engaging in a new way. Does that make sense? It's not always about coming back together, but it's about bringing love into it. So let's just say we've got the timeline healing that we're doing. I'll just put TH. And then the belief clearing is usually 150. Just put BC. I'm going to throw in a couple of bonuses into this, which is I'm doing an open to understanding meditation. It's a guided meditation where it allows you to move from the resistance stage into the empathy stage. If you're stuck at resistance and there is that anger, this meditation will help you to soften. It's so important. It is like I said, it's really the magic bridge into moving into those places of compassion, but it's what allows you to settle your energy more, right? So that is normally $27. That's the meditation. And then the final bonus is a training video, an in-depth training video on the healing triangle, which is 97, right? And that video is just going to explain every step in depth, the questions to ask at each step, the emotions at each level, what might be holding you back from moving on to each next stage. And it's basically to really give you the roadmap for healing yourself, your relationships, and you'll just always know the next step, where you're at because of what's present. If you just have that awareness and say, oh, wow, I'm actually here because I feel this way. Then it's like, okay, I know exactly what the next steps are. I need to soften, or I need to look at more positive aspects of this person and maybe focus on the positives because I've made them so negative. I've held them down so much for so long to see them clearly. So we're doing all that. And today, for anyone that watched the webinar, it's going to be $250. All that together equals $469 usually. If you're interested in that, then you can go to my website. It's brett-peters.com. And then you've just, the full thing is brett-peters.com/relationship-reset. That's what it's called. This is the relationship reset package. And really it's just something that I believe that will transform your relationships. I really, really believe that. So think about it, feel into it. If you know it's right for you, then message me, go online, you can do it, and then you can book an appointment in. You're getting the 2 calls. Usually one time on healing, which is 90 minutes, is $195, and this is $150 on its own. So just those 2 together for $250, for me, is super valuable. I really believe in the work because I love doing it with myself. I love doing it with my partner, Haifa. I love doing it with all my clients because I see the beautiful results. And after your second call, if you go through the timeline healing and the belief clearing and nothing changes, if you don't get any more insights or if you don't get any awareness or more clarity, then I'm offering a money back guarantee, because if it doesn't give you the value that I'm saying it will, then I'm not going to take the money. It's really about you getting value, and I want you to really feel safe in that as well. It's so important to be able to trust, and I feel like that helps people trust more, because it's really coming from my heart, and it's my heart's work, and I really want to share that with you. So if you want to heal those relationships, we can do multiple, but you can pick a parent, you can pick a friend, anyone where you feel blocked with, that is going to be valid for. You can do multiple. If you're interested in that, just message me. We can do a deal for something like that. But otherwise, that's what I have for you. And yeah, I would love to help you in any way if you feel ready to really make some changes. Yes, there's going to be discomfort. Yes, courage is involved. There's going to be more unknown, but that is the beauty about it. And that is required for all healing. Often healing isn't really comfortable, you know? So we have to go through that, and I would be more than happy to support anyone that's interested. So thank you all very much for joining and watching. I would love to know what you thought. You can drop a comment in the chat.